Good evening, everyone. It's time for the weekly TechNet. My name is Marty, K0MLG, Kilo Zero, Mike, Lima Golf, located near Wellington. I'll be tonight's net control for the directed weekly TechNet. When checking in, please use your call sign, and then again phonetically, and then your name, location. Let's do a temperature check tonight. Boy, really cooled off out here near Wellington this late afternoon, early evening. Anybody with privileges to be on this repeater are welcome to check in. Please do so if you have a topic of technical nature or not. If you've got a question, we'll try to find answers. I do have one little topic tonight that I've thought of and of an experience over the last few days, so we'll touch on that. I will take check-ins Alpha through Mike. Alpha through Mike, just go slow, and because I'm moving slow today. Yeah, go slow. We'll take check-ins Alpha through Mike. Go ahead.
AE0KO, Alpha Echo 0 Kilo Oscar, Brad Mobile in Fort Collins, and it is 77 here.
Whiskey 0 Lima Echo India W0LEI, Chad in Stouch, and it is 73 here.
K0ARD Kilo 0 Alpha Romeo Delta, and in Fort Collins, and it is 74.
Okay. Bob has everybody trained to stop at 3. Okay, well, the net will like to acknowledge Brad, KOLEI, Chad, and ARD, and any more check-ins for, and also got your temps too. By the way, mine is 71 out here near Wellington. Any more check-ins for tonight's net? Go ahead.
Kilo Delta 0 Echo X-Ray Victor, Brian Mobile, 70 degrees.
Kilo Foxtrot 0 Golf Quebec Hotel, Kent in Wellington. My thermometer says 79. I don't believe it.
This is N0EMP, November 0, Echo Mike Papa, Greg in Fort Collins with Debbie, K0DBE, Kilo 0 Delta Bravo Echo, and I have a topic revisiting an earlier topic about swelling lithium batteries in 0EMP.
All right, well, hold up there. We got you in there, Brian, EXV, Kent, GQH, Greg and Debbie, EMP and DBE, and yeah, we'll touch on that topic too, because I had that on the back of my brain too, to give you an update on what my batteries are doing. Any more check-ins for tonight's TechNet? Please go ahead.
Whiskey 0 Delta Papa Charlie, Donald in Longmont.
Whiskey Bravo 0 Uniform Charlie Golf, WB0 UCG Jeff in Boulder.
This is KP0 YDN Kilo Bravo 0 Yankee Delta November, Eric, mobile towards Pinewood Lake, 70 degrees on 34, with traffic, 2 items.
All right, hold up there. W0 Delta Papa Charlie, Donald, Longmont. WB0 Uniform Charlie Golf, Jeff in Boulder. And Eric, YDN, 70 degrees, mobile on Highway 34. Any more check-ins for tonight's night? Go ahead.
This is K5 SGC, Kilo 5 Sierra Golf Charlie. Dave, Fort Collins, and it is 75 Fahrenheit.
This is KM6 VAY Kilo Mike 6 Victor Alpha Yankee, Steve in Sedalia, 59 degrees, light drizzle tailing off tonight. Beautiful stargazing night, best night of the month to look.
Okay, got you in there, Dave. K5 SGC at 75 and KM6 VAY Steve Sedalia 59 light drizzle. That sounds like heaven right there. I just went up to the barn a little bit ago and I thought I felt couple little drops, but Not seeing anything on the windows, so I don't even know what the forecast is. Any more check-ins for tonight's TechNet? Go ahead. This is K0MLG. My name is Marty near Wellington.
This is N0NYY, November 0, November Yankee, Bart in Evans with a heat wave at 82 degrees at the airport. I'm surprised.
This is AE0CF Alpha Echo 0 Charlie Foxtrot, Ben, Fort Collins, and it's 74 here.
Kilo 3 Sierra Alpha Delta, Kilo 3 Sierra Alpha Delta, 26 degrees Celsius, George and Winter.
That's got to be about 70, let's see, Dave said 25 and corrected to 75 or something like that. So you got to be a little high 70s. Any more check-ins for tonight's net? I've got you in there, George, SAD, and Ben, Charlie Foxtrot, Bart, NYY. I'm glad I'm not in Greeley. 82's not near as comfortable as 71. Any more check-ins for tonight's net?
Kilo 0, Hotel Alpha Kilo, K0, HAK. Dave in Fort Collins, and Weather Underground has me at 73 degrees Fahrenheit.
This is Foxtrot 0, Golf, Quebec, India, Doc in Pierce with a balmy 78 degrees.
Okay, got you in there, Dave, with 73, and Doc, got you in there at 78. We're going to go ahead and start tonight's net. If there's any emergency traffic while we are yik-yakking back and forth, holler break, we'll suspend the net, take care of your traffic, and then continue on with the net. Is there any priority traffic at this time? All right. Well, I'll start with mine. It's we've talked about grounding before, home stations and mobiles. I have a back rack. Most of you are familiar with a back rack on a pickup is. And then to mount light bars and light sticks and whatnot, I used a clamp-on mount. So it mounts with U-bolts. Now the back rack was grounded to the bed of the truck. The bed of the truck is grounded to the frame. And I have some light sticks, LED light sticks, were giving me some grief, so I grounded the back rack to the clamp-on mount, and that didn't cure it. I had to use a bunch of ferrite beads and get creative with running the wiring for the light sticks. So I still have some noise. I'll have to deal with that. I don't think it'll ever go away until I go with a different style of stick. Also, I've been noticing I and a few people, we talk simplex quite regularly, and my signal was not quite what I thought it should be, right? So, I built brackets for UHF mounts. Basically, take whatever material, metal or stainless or aluminum, and put a half-inch hole in it and use barrel connectors with washers, flat washers, lock washers, and nuts, and make your own UHF mount. Been doing it for years. But normally with aluminum, and I didn't have any aluminum handy, so I used some steel. Sure enough, taking the mounts apart, there was some rust in there, so a wheel brush on a drill cleaned all that up, put it all back together with dielectric grease, and that's what I wanted to touch on. Anytime you're making a connection, dielectric grease is your friend. It's cheap enough. You can get it in different shapes and forms and sizes. So grounding with dielectric, and you can't have enough grounding. Don't ever forget the dielectric. Any comments on that, and then we'll move on to Greg, if there's nothing to be said on grounding and dielectric grease and keeping things clean. All right, there was two for sure, and Bart and Eric. Go ahead, Bart.
So dielectric grease is an insulator, or supposed to be. Not necessary in a grounding application. You can use regular grease there too.
dielectric will work, because when you clamp the metal tightly, you'll squeeze the grease out from between. The key is that it keeps moisture from getting in there. I've used regular grease in those applications as well, because I don't need the non-conductive properties of dielectric for a grounding connection. However, I think the biggest difference in dielectric is probably slightly more expensive than regular grease. But how much are you using? So if you've got it, that's fine. The dielectric doesn't hurt. As I said, it pinches out from between the two metals. But it's not necessary to use dielectric on a grounding connection. And zero in my way.
Copy that, Bart. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I do want to say that I have applied dielectric grease in that manner, and be careful following the directions on the label, because they say, goop it up as much as possible and then try and fit the pieces together. Well, if pieces fit together well, dielectric grease will not flow cleanly out. So be judicious. You might want to use a little and put the connection together, and maybe use a little bit more and put the connection together, and use a little more and maybe take some out because you just overdid it. But make sure you get the right balance of water displacement and good contact in your connector. There is such a thing as too much. Ask me how I know this. KB0YDN, back to them.
Yeah, more is not better. I just use a thin coat of it. Just smear it on there with my finger, and if somebody would just happen to blink and look at it, or look at it right quick, you wouldn't even notice it was on there. It's just a real thin coating. And I neglected to do it when I put it together the first time, and now I had to spend a little bit of time cleaning things up. But I brought my SWR from a 1.7 back down to 1.1 or 1.2 or something like that, and it wasn't really. It was very, very little rust, very little, but enough to cause a swirl problem. Anywho, that's what I do. Do as you may, but keep your connections clean however you want to do it. Over to you, Greg. N0EMP. This is K0MLG. Go ahead.
Thanks, Marty. So, several weeks, maybe a month or two ago, we were talking about you had some lithium batteries, at least one pack from an HT, and it was swelling, and you were trying to decide what to do with it. I have a drone that I bought probably at least 5 years ago off Craigslist that came with 2 batteries, so I don't know how old it is because I bought it used. And these were lithium polymer batteries. They were 3-cell packs, kind of in a soft plastic flexible enclosure. They weren't a hard battery like you'd have for an HT. They were kind of soft with a pair of wires coming out to a connector, and I stored those and some other batteries I had in my outbuilding inside some concrete cinder blocks to try to contain them a little bit. And I went and looked at them a couple weeks ago, and they were puffed up. They were swollen. Let me reset this. So I did what any responsible adult would do. I took the most puffed out one out in the middle of the yard and hooked up an automotive battery charger and turned it on. Of course, this is rated for much more current than the approved charger. Well, after 15 minutes, it had puffed up some more, but nothing else happened. So I hit the 40-amp jump start feature on the charger, and it still didn't do anything. Let me reset. So in the spirit of adult responsible behavior, I put it in front of a stump and shot it with a .22 caliber air rifle. The results were impressive and instant and very dramatic. I have some prior experience with thermite, and this was as impressive as thermite. And this was a 3-cell battery, so it flared up like a jet, and then the fire died back down. And then it flared up a second time and died down. Then it flared up a third time, so I assume that the 3 individual cells inside the battery pack were taking turns. I imagine the pellet only hit one cell, and then it took turns burning through each cell, and it set the stump on fire. Let me reset. So I have a spare fireproof safe in my outbuilding that's empty, or was empty, and now it has all my lithium batteries in it. I had some 18-volt Ryobi 1 Plus batteries for various hand tools, and I had a couple of 40-volt, big 40-volt Ryobi batteries for string trimmer and a chainsaw. And those are all living out there inside the fire safe now with nothing else. N0 EMP.
Well, the first question that everybody has is there a video of it?
There's not a video of this. However, if I didn't, I think I mentioned that there were 2 batteries that were puffed up. So there's still 1. So I can certainly recreate this, because the other battery is no safe being around either. And I actually bought a ceramic kiln, an electric kiln for firing pottery. And that battery is living inside that kiln right now, where it cannot do any damage no matter what. So there could be a video down the road. But there are some very good YouTube videos regarding lithium polymer batteries. And I will say that those videos are accurate as to what they depict. N0 EMP.
Well, my batteries have not done anything with except leave them outside in the weather, just to see what they're going to do. They're away from anything that would burn. And the crack, they just keep getting bulged and bulged and bulged and bulged. The crack just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Because there was quite a bit of interest in seeing these things get shot with with all the weather we've had, and everything's crazy busy. So I just haven't done any of them, except, like I said, they just keep getting more swollen. Anybody else have any comments on lithium polymers or lithium ions or anything about batteries? Go ahead, K0MLG.
YDN.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yes, I actually just saw one of those videotapes on YouTube where somebody did from the well-thought-through confines of their living room coffee table. And obviously it did not go well, and yes, it was spectacular.
That sounds like the same mentality of people that deep fry their turkey in their house. All right. Eric, you did have a topic, so now that you have the mic, continue on.
It kind of sounded like his radio cut out there at the end, so he may be having technical difficulties as the TV, the old television used to say, N0 EMP.
Old Greg. I think you said Greg, Eric has technical difficulties, and I think he got into a dead spot. Are you back yet, Eric?
I am back. Greg was correct. I did have technical difficulties. I don't know what the rest of what he said was, but that part was indeed correct. Let's see if I have the repeater now.
You do, and you had a topic. Go ahead.
Okay. 2 topics. Greg is remiss luncheon this Wednesday, and I will be able to make it. That's the boring topic. The other topic is a follow-up on the snubber discussion we had last Monday, where Mark gently but firmly poked me into do not pass go, put a diode across that solenoid. And I did just that in a follow-up conversation I had with him when I said, which diode I use? He said, oh, I never used that one. Well, at the same time, I got a message from another ham and EE, who I respect, who said, just throw a 1N4003 across it. Now, what I happened to have on hand was a 1N4004, which just has a higher reverse voltage rating. Bart was said that's probably not fast enough, so I would recommend you do a different diode. So one diode I had on hand, again, remember that phrase, was 1N914. Now it looks like it's fast enough, but it looks just barely capable of doing the job. It can take a very short burst of 1 amp current, and it can also take a very short burst of 75 volts. I don't know how good it is, so I thought the logical thing to do was confuse myself further and ask here.
N0EMP is really typically 12 volt. What are you running it at 12 volts?
Speed strong enough. The goal is not to blow the diode and not to damage the radio that's powering the solenoid.
N0EMP.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Eric, are you running the relay at like 12 volts?
That's correct.
So when you open the contacts or open the current supplying that relay, if you have nothing across the relay, voltage will climb up and you can get some pretty high voltage across the coil. But if you have a diode shunting it, that's a fast enough diode, the current will start flowing through that diode and your voltage will not climb. So you won't see, well, first of all, you'll be applying forward voltage to the diode, so you won't see an inverse voltage. Your inverse voltage would be that 12 volts that was on the coil. So you're not going to exceed inverse voltage ratings. And your forward voltage will turn into current flowing through the forward biased diode. So as long as it switches on quick enough, you won't really have a big voltage rise there. So you should be okay. One of the 1N4000 series diodes, at least one of them, was a Schottky diode, which I think are faster. So that guy that recommended a certain specific 1N4000 something diode, he might have been recommending the one that's a Schottky diode, I don't know. But any of those 4000 series should work in N0EMP.
In this particular case, I'm looking at a single data sheet for 4001, 4002, 4003, 4004, 4005, and 4006. All they have different is the PIV. And, repetitive reverse voltage, max RMS voltage, max DC blocking voltage, but no discussion about Schottky or otherwise. And that shouldn't really apply. I mean, we don't care that there's a 1.7 volt difference across the diode versus a 0.7 volt in this case. But everything else is the same. The concern was it reacting fast enough to help the electronics upstream in the ICOM 7300, which is feeding it the voltage to protect that. It reassured me by quite a bit. KB0YDM, back to Matt.
EMP.
Yes.
I got two of you. I got you, Ben, and Greg.
Yeah, as I'm continuing to dredge up this distant memory, I think I misspoke. It's not actually a Schottgate diode, it's a PIN diode, PIN. So, regardless, like I said, it's not going to see the high voltage that could develop won't be inverse voltage. It'll be forward voltage in your circuit. So as long as your inverse voltage is above 12 volts, which you're way above that, you'll be fine. The other thing would be put an oscilloscope across it, preferably a digital one that can sample and hold, and just capture the waveform when you open the circuit and see what's happening, and zero EMP.
Yeah, I've got an analog scope. I don't have a digital scope that's worth anything. Well, I don't have a digital scope of anything. It sounds like I'm doing everything correctly. Bart at Picnic suggested that I should put a scope on it without the diode to see what it exactly does, and it opened up a couple of brain cells I completely had forgotten about as a kid, taking transformer primaries and putting 9-volt DC across them, and then pulling a wire away and watching the arc fly.
And why?
Go ahead, Bart.
I used to enjoy shocking myself. Call me what you will, I loved it, but I built up an immunity after a while, which is probably gone by now. So the diode, the flyback diode on the relay or solenoid coil, is reversed biased with the 12 volts. It's forward biased with the flyback voltage, which is opposite the actuating voltage, and can be a substantial number of times greater. The 914 has a 4 nanosecond recovery. That's probably going to work okay. If you were dealing with higher, larger situations, that may be a little slow. The 914 is a pretty lightweight diode, but all it's doing is providing a very, very quick path for that flyback voltage. And there will be a negative voltage that does build up. It comes down to the rate at which that voltage slopes up and the rate at which the diode swamps it. So you'll go from 70 or 80 volts of inverse voltage to a volt or two that the diode can bear in a very, very short time. I mean, it's hard to measure it so fast. A good digital storage scope that's fast will catch it, but an analog scope, you're never going to see any of this. You can see the inverse spike, and you can kind of get an idea what the magnitude is with a regular analog scope. But as far as your remedy goes, you'll never catch that once you put the diode on. And the 4000 series are pretty heavy on current. They do well, but their recovery time is probably 3 or 4 times what the 914 is. I have a whole list of, I think they're 5600 series diodes that are really stinking fast. And they're designed primarily as flyback diodes for inductive circuits. And they're on my way back to them.
Yeah, okay. Well, the 914 happened to be the one of choice because in one of my several piles of unsorted junk, I found a strip of 50 for a pick-and-place machine that was repackaged by Radio Shack into, here's 50 and one end 914s. And so I said, I've used 8 of these, I can use one more. Ben had some comments on that, and he mentioned at the picnic that he might have a decent diode for me as well that was appropriate for the purpose. But 914s are pretty light on current. It can handle 1 amp, but that's literally just about it. You know, it has survived 3-4 power cycles, but it's only after this conversation that I feel a little more reassured. K0YDM BackNet.
K0MLG net control for this week's BackNet. Ben, are you still in there?
Yeah, still here.
You had a comment. Go ahead.
I guess I have 2 quick ones right now. Yeah, those quote-unquote stinking fast diode, first of all, is the Schottky diodes. That's the 1N582 2-ish series, and that's one thing. And then the other thing is speeds. I just wanted to mention that there are 2 speeds related to diodes. One is turning on and one is turning off. I guess for this specific instance, turning off is probably not really a diode turning on is not really a big issue because this happens when you turn the relay on. Stop for a moment here. Okay, this is a pretty complicated issue here. Well, not really, but the rated speeds of the diodes are basically the turn-off speed. The reason why it is a big issue is because when you want to shut off a diode, it takes time for a diode to turn off, and this number is listed for you just because the fact that shutting off is a big problem for specifically a lot of switching power supplies. You don't want it to conduct for any longer than it needs to be, and this is because generally because of the capacitance, how much charge on junction. However, there's another time, which is the forward recovery time, and for most diodes, this is extremely fast, even the quote-unquote slow diodes. So I would imagine that even those slow, quote-unquote slow 1N4001s are plenty fast for the forward recovery, which is the more interesting number when you're using it for flyback protection. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too for flyback protection is that sometimes people don't even use a diode at all. They just use a capacitor and a resistor in parallel with it. Capacitor is basically since you're changing the voltage so fast when you're going when you're trying to snub a flyback, the capacitor is going to be shorted when you're trying to do that because the capacitor is trying to resist the change in voltage, and the resistor is used to make sure they don't ring. Easy UCF BackNet.
IDN.
Good, Eric.
Thank you, Ben. It hadn't occurred to me to use like a small ceramic capacitor with a resistor across it to do that, but I imagine that it would function exactly as you say, because the abrupt voltage change would make the capacitor appear, quote-unquote, conductive as it quickly reverses its charge, and then the resistor would stop it from ringing. Makes perfect sense. KB0YDN, back to net. You guys can carry on with other subjects, so I am not hogging it.
Copy that. Well, it sounds like you got some good answers. Anybody else have a topic or comment for tonight's net? HAK. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this topic is maybe a little almost remedial. I kind of want to just discuss how people strip their coax cable, particularly something like an LMR 400. I've always kind of just used a little razor blade and some clippers to clip back the shielding and things like that, and that's worked pretty well, but it's pretty time-consuming. It's tedious. So I bought like a stripper tool from DX Engineering, and I'm not crazy about it. I just didn't know if anybody else had a tool they prefer for LMR 400, or if everybody just kind of uses a little razor blade, kind of like I traditionally do. Go ahead.
EMP.
Good, EMP. I can't find this brand that I use. You're probably doing the same thing. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of coax terminations, so I take some small diagonal cutters and I snip down the jacket from the tip until I get as far as I want, and then I use it to cut around the circumference and take the jacket off, and then I do the same thing to cut some shielding off, and then I'll use some lineman's tool to strip the polyethylene or the foam off of the center conductor. Like I said, I don't do a lot of coax. James, KI0KN, does a lot of coax terminations, and he has a set of tools. I don't know if DX Engineering sells them. I imagine they do. But these are like a plastic octagonal kind of a grip thing that opens up like it's hinged, and it's got these nasty little razor blades on the inside, and there's different ones for different size cable, like LMR 400 or RG8 or RG8X, and they clamp over the cable, and you squeeze them in your hand and give it a twist and pull it, and in one move the cable's done. It has cut the jacket off, it has cut the shield to the proper length, and it has cut the center conductor to the right length. Again, I don't do a lot of coax, and I don't have those fancy tools, but James does. And 0 EMP.
All right, I can't find the brand of this tool. I have the same thing James uses. It's hinged in the middle. You push down on it, and like Greg said, it's got two razor blades. Plus, you can adjust the height, or let's say the depth of the cut, with a couple adjustments. It comes with a built-in Allen wrench, and you put this over the end. There's a round, like a ring that you would wear on your finger. At the end of this thing, you spin it around 2 or 3 times, and like Greg said, everything's cut perfect. You slide it off, and you're ready to go. Stand by, Bart. What brand, or what did you buy, Dave? Does it sound similar to that?
Yeah, it does. I think it's actually what Greg was describing. It's kind of a plastic, some kind of a poly material, and I think it's actually a DX Engineering brand, but the problem I'm having with it is that the center conductor does not seem to get cut long enough, and then I don't have a way to solder the tip in once I push the connector down. So it's a little concerning for me. I'm very curious what James is using, or how he's using it, if he's having a similar experience or not.
Well, you can this one here, you can adjust however much center conductor you want sticking out. You just push the coax in a little bit farther. I'd have to look online and see. There's just no product name. I can tell you this. I got the small one for Mini 8 coax, or small diameter. It's RG8X, I guess is what it is. And it's got a yellow, or not yellow, an orange insert to where you can go different diameters of RG8X. You could do you could do 58, you could do 59, whatever. And then there's another one for the RG8X. I imagine that's what you have. Go ahead, Bart.
So there's a couple different stages of tools to do that. There are ones that are very, very connector specific. If you use this particular connector on this coax all the time, this device is like you said, you clamp it on, you spin it around, you pull it off. It does the jacket, the center conductor, the dielectric, and the shield perfect every time. But it is very connector specific. Then there's the one that I think Marty's talking about where you have some adjustment in the center conductor and maybe some adjustment in the jacket length, and then you have to set it up for each connector to work, and if you're going to do 8 or 10 of them, it's great. Then there's a more basic version. The best ones I think are made by a company called Jonard, Juliet, Oscar, November, Alpha, Romeo, Delta. I would not spring for those unless you're doing this for a living. I did at Lightning Motors, and we did a lot of jacket stripping. Basically, it's a 90-degree piece of steel that's very smooth and shiny on the inside. Opposite that, there is a blade that is held perpendicular to the axis of the coax, and there's a very fine adjustment of that blade for a depth of cut. And there's other companies that make these tools that are probably $20, $25 a piece. Once you have it set up to cut the jacket, you set it so it doesn't go all the way through the jacket. It cuts about 90% of it. You put it on, you spin it around, you pull it off, you bend the coax, and that little bend in the coax is enough to break the jacket clean and slide it right off. But then you have to do the braid and the foam and the center conductor yourself. If you're not doing it for a living, those are fine, and they're really, really good for the jacket. They're not really good for the braid, although you can use it on the braid if you slide the jacket down and don't slide it all the way up and make another cut. You can cut the braid right where you want it. But unless you're doing it for a living, I would not spend the money for the Jonard or the Westwood tools.
EMP.
Hi. Hey, Greg.
Yeah, the tools I'm thinking of do not cut the center conductor. Like Marty said, you decide how far in you want to push the coax, or put the coax before you close this thing, and that's where the tip of your center conductor is. It does not cut the center conductor. It cuts the jacket, the shield, and the dielectric, and strips them off of the center conductor, but it does not cut the center conductor wire. You trim that yourself manually, or you put it into the right depth to begin with. I'm looking on DX Engineering now, and the ones that I saw James use, there are some plastic-bodied ones that are color-coded, orange, green, and red, for instance. These are DXE part numbers. They're all DXE-UT, Uniform Tango. There's a 405C-P1, a 240C-P1, 405C-N1. I imagine that's for an N connector. And a lime green one, that's a 240CN1. Each one of these is $43 on DX Engineering, so like you said, get the ones for the cable and connector you're going to use. They're not real cheap. N0 EMP.
HAK.
K0MLG. Go ahead, Dave. And I'm sending you what I have. I just found them on Amazon. I don't remember if that's where I ordered them from, but that's the one I have. And there's a gauge on the stripper from 4, 6, 8, and 12 millimeters. So you can lay your coax on that. And then like use your fingernail, thumbnail or something to mark it, and put the tool over the end of it. And like Greg said, then it trims everything just perfect. Now you have to adjust it with this Allen wrench to get the blades the perfect depth. But once you do that, then you can have 2 ends stripped off in 30 seconds, if not faster.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marty. I'll take a look at that in a little bit. And Greg, you're absolutely right. I misspoke when I said it cuts the center conductor too short. It doesn't cut the center conductor all. You're right. The problem is and the ones you were describing are the ones that I actually have. This red one with the plastic body on it. The problem I have is that I can't push the coax, the entire body of the coax, into the stripper far enough to get enough center conductor. Let me try that again. To get enough center conductor exposed to actually go into my connector, so that I can get a good solder on it. It cuts it off so short, or it trims it so short that it's like halfway into the little connector, center conductor tube of the connector. Anyway, Marty, I'll take a look at what you've sent over to me, and I'll see if that works any better for me. Thanks, K0HAK.
I think that maybe a coax class needs to be in order. I just bought these strippers last year because I just got tired of a sharp knife and a soldering iron and maybe some side cutters. That's all I've ever done for decades. I didn't want to do that anymore, so these are $9 a piece. I've got one for the smaller coax, one for the bigger coax. Now I'm using airborne tin messium poloni wire, and I can't adjust, and which is 0.400. But the way that coax is designed, it's something just a little bit different than Time's microwave LMR 400. The strippers don't work properly on them, but the Italians have a completely different way of doing things. They have a neat pair of scissors / shears, and it takes a little bit of practice, but I can get it done pretty well. It's not quite as easy. It's just a completely different coax. If I ever had a class, I'd bring some down. K0MLG for the beep. Any other questions or comments on coax stripping?
EMP.
IBM. You just guys like to talk about strippers. Go ahead, Greg.
I won't say it. It looks like these DX Engineering ones that I was looking at that I think James has, it looks like there's one for PL259 connectors, and there's one floor end connectors. So I'm wondering, Dave, if you have the wrong one for the connector that you're using in 0EMP.
I actually have both. Go ahead.
Okay, do they both leave the shield a little bit short?
I've never had a chance to use the end connector one, only the PL259, so I can't speak for the end connector one.
Okay, and 0EMP.
That makes me wonder if the ID between those two connectors is different. Something about an end connector is different than a 259. I haven't used them. I've got 4 that I need to, or 6 that I need to install. 6 to get a repeater on the air this week. So that might be interesting. Eric, I believe you had a comment. Go ahead.
I did. I'm cheap. I didn't even look for a tool. I went down to Home Depot and got a pipe cutter and set it gently to not go through the outer shield, but to leave a nice, terrible ring that you can take right off. And it's very easily adjustable. It has a thumb screw just for that.
Tubing cutter. I have never heard of anybody using a tubing cutter on coax. But hey, it's not stupid if it works. That's for sure. If it does the job, then we need a class. or maybe not such a class, but a show and tell to see how everybody's doing it. Then everybody can make their own decision on how they want to proceed with coax terminations.
Sounds like fun to me. I'll attend if somebody puts something together. K0HAK.
NYY.
Oh Lord, this could be all sorts of fun. What kind of soldering iron do you use? What your heat setting is, and I'd like to definitely show you people how the Italians do it. It's completely different than our way of things and far superior in my opinion. Go ahead, Bart.
The W2MIC Memorial Method of Coax Prep. You call Pasternak and you order what you need. I tried to get him to show him how to do coax, and he just got frustrated and angry and said, you know what, it's worth my time and money to order it. And that is a pretty good solution. Pasternak is not cheap, but they do very good work. And they're on my way.
Yeah, but there's times you can't do that. You can't have pre-made, which in that case you would have had to have somebody do it. One example, I'm using an ICOM AH4 tuner in my pickup to do invis work. Mobile, not stationary with 84 feet of wire straight. This is a 102 whip bent over. The tuner does not have any connections on the outside of the tuner. You have to pull the box off. You have to run your coax in through the cover, terminate the end, and then put the cover back on. Now, what I did was made a small jumper. This is what BNC did. I did. Some other people that don't worry about them being weatherproof, they take the 239 from the inside, they put a hole in the cover and use that. But there's some applications where you can't have, let's say you're going to put coax through your wall. I would just as soon have a small hole to deal with instead of a big hole that all the fittings go through. But it's kind of a wonderment to me how many people can't solder. Amateur extras that can talk about how you can build anything but can't use a soldering iron. And that's kind of the same way with coax here, it seems. I think some sort of workshop afternoon is in order to kind of go over things. I mean, I wouldn't mind learning some new tricks because sometimes it's a pain in the butt. I terminated a couple ends the other day, over the Friday, and I got it too short, and then you have to kind of start over. So, and this is another thing. If you don't do it every day, you kind of forget how long should you strip that outer shield off. I know. I just look at it and go, that ought to be pretty close, and it usually is. Any other comments? We're going on an hour here. K0MLG.
EMP.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, for pre-made cables, there is a company here in Fort Collins, which I have no connection to whatsoever, called Collins Communication, and they're up on Link Lane up north. And they have the equipment and supplies to make up LMR 400 cables with crimp-on connectors that are either PL259 or N connectors. They could probably do a LMR 240 with a BNC connector. I've never asked. But they have a hydraulic crimper for the outside shield, and they solder the center conductor. And they have regular LMR 400, and they have direct bury LMR 400. So if you need a pre-made cable that's some odd length, like 72 feet, they'll make you one very happily. and I found their price to be reasonable. I have a bump out here in my front. I'm sitting in my shack, which is in the front of the house, and this room has a bump out, so to speak, so that the front wall on the outside sticks out about 1.5 feet from the basement wall, and it's up about 8 inches or 10 inches from the ground. And I started off, like Marty said, I would drill a 1/2-inch hole, and I would put a .40 coax through it, and then solder a connector on the inside here in the room. So I would feed coax in that way. Let me reset. I eventually got bored with that and drilled a great big 2-inch hole through the floor and put a PVC flange and a pipe through. So now I just can take coax that already has a termination on the end and stick it through. And then I stick foam in the hole to keep the mice and the spiders out. And 0 EMP.
Somehow or another, and I have not heard this repeater do this, that's announcing nodes connected and disconnected. This particular time it was disconnected, and when it did that, the repeater ceased hearing your signal, Greg. So we caught very little of what you just said, unfortunately.
Okay, let me repeat, and I'll break it into smaller bites.
That'd be a good deal. I don't know what's going on with this. I've just never heard it do that. Poor James. One more thing on the list. Go ahead, Greg. K0MLG.
So point number 1, there's a company in Fort Collins, Collins Communications, up on Link Lane, that will make coax cables, and they have hydraulic crimpers, and they'll make LMR cables with N or PL 259 connectors. Let me reset and listen. So I've been very happy with those cables, and I've used some of them. They'll do regular LMR 400 or direct bury, and I think they'll do LMR 240 as well. Let me reset and listen. I have a bump out. This room I'm in for my shack bumps out forward of the basement wall, so that I can put coax up through the bottom of the front wall. And I used to drill 0.5-inch holes and put 0.4 coax through it, and then terminate them like you said. Let me reset. And I eventually got tired of that and drilled a 2-inch hole in the floor and put a 2-inch PVC pipe through it with a flange. And now I just jam cables through there with the connector already on the end and stick foam in there to keep the mice and spiders out. And 0 EMP.
Yeah, it's a good way of doing it. Always have a portal for coax. Makes life so much easier. Any other comments on coax or anything else?
Yeah, I got do have a late check-in, Camp 0GZ, Kilo Fox 0, Golf Zulu Zulu, Patrick, Mobile to Greeley. Been listening to the coax workshop on the way from Longmont.
KF0, Golf Zulu Zulu. All right. Thanks for checking in. What's your name?
Patrick.
All right. I got that right, didn't I? KF0, Golf Zulu Zulu?
Yeah, it's Turner of Camp 0GZ.
Any other late check-ins or traffic for the net tonight?
Kilo 60, Jim and 11, Kilo Alpha 6, Echo Tango Echo.
Got you in there, Jim, and I do believe I heard W7RF. Is that you, Dan?
That is correct. I am here, just listening. That's all I got. W7RF saying hello.
Just listening and terminating coax ends. All right. Well, thanks for checking in, guys. Anybody else have any topics, subject, comments, or anything for the net tonight?
AF7M, we're just checking in. No comments. Been very interesting listening. Thank you.
Okay, there was two of you. I have AF7, fill in the rest, and then the other station that said, very interesting comments, stand by, let AF7 go. What's your fill in?
Yeah, Marty, it's Phil, AI 7PM, just northbound 25, copying it. Good net, AI 7PM.
Man, I really messed up. I looked at that, and I went, no, I think that's Phil. That other station, go ahead.
Foxtrot 7, Mike, Oscar, good net, got to concur. Thank you very much.
All right, Mike Oscar, what's your name?
Roger, in Windsor.
Oh, roger that. Anybody else want to check in, have comments or something like that for the net? Go ahead.
K0AZA, late check-in, just saying hello.
Copy that, Ron. Good evening. Anybody else?
ETE comment.
Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I was listening when you were talking about the repeater timed out, or the node 1275 when Greg was talking. What the node 1275 is the 275 repeater itself. It timed out, and in order for, when the primary times out, in order for it to reset, it has to wait till there is a complete clear signal. So it got delayed with Greg still on the mic, between Greg still on the mic and then some of the RF and stuff up there. It took it a little bit to get a clear signal to reset. Until it resets itself, it'll appear to be a dead repeater. You won't be able to key it up or anything. KA6ET.
Yeah, and Greg had no way of knowing. The only way you would know is if you're monitoring on an HT or some other radio, you're monitoring your own traffic. So that's kind of weird. I've never heard it do that before. But anyway, thanks for the update on that, Jim.
Yeah, definitely. Greg was long-winded like some other people tonight. But KA6ET.
I think there was a quick double in there. Was there somebody else doubling with Jim?
Yeah, Patrick, KF0GZ. I was just wondering, I got a pretty weak signal in Longmont this evening. I don't know if there's was something to deal with the repeater with that, or I tried swapping out antennas on my truck at a stoplight and didn't get a difference, so I don't know if it was me or if it was the repeater from the start there.
Well, it depends upon what part of Longmont you're in. This repeater shadowed down there pretty good. You can use 447.750. They're linked together. I'm not going to tell you the tone because it was going to get changed, and then it didn't get changed. What's the tone on that, Jim? 750.
141.3 with the negative offset.
Okay, yeah, I remember the night that I announced it got changed, got chewed out because it didn't.
I don't know.
And I said, no, that's good information you guys just don't have.
Cool clouds coming over.
Anyway, Patrick, 447.750 with a PL of 141.3 will get you rock solid down in that part of the country.
All right, thanks for the info. I think I'm in a shadow now in my house, so if you guys can hear me, I appreciate it, and you guys have a good night.
Nope, you're 100%. No problem. Thanks for jumping in. All right. Any other questions, comments, or topics for the net tonight? Go ahead. K0MLG.
And YY, I'm going to nominate you for a Marathon Net Award tonight.
I had one go for over an hour and a half one night. The topics and subjects and learning just kept going on and on.
And it's a wonderful thing. M0 in my way.
I'm surprised I made it this far. Man, I am beat after the last few days. Any other comments or suggestions or whatever? Go ahead.
Yeah, W0LEI.
Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, I have a question about grounding radials on a vertical. Normally, I read an article and they seem to be concerned about keeping the radials isolated from the ground, and I don't do that. I just have them out there. If they're isolated, they're isolated, and I just wondered if anybody had any input on that.
W7RF.
There's the guy right there. Go ahead.
The
are elevated, in other words, not laying on the ground, then the only connection that the radials should have is to the shield of the coax. If the radials are on the ground, like a ground-mounted vertical, it's okay to go ahead and use a ground rod at the base to go ahead and ground the radials if you wish.
Yeah, that's basically that's what I got. I've got a ground rod at the base. It's ground mounted, and just got them laying on the ground. And I never heard any dissertation one way or the other, and that's just the way I did it. Seems to work fine.
Yes, ground-mounted radials are okay to go ahead and ground, with a ground rod if you wish, or you could just lay them on the ground. And of course, the shield of the coax connects to that. And then you should have a common mode choke, either RFI chokes snapped over the coax or a 1-to-1 current balun at the base of the vertical. And the minimum, in my opinion, is 16 radials on the ground, but you could benefit quite a bit by going to 32. Over 32 is a lot of work for an extra half or 3/4 of a dB. It does not make that much difference what the actual length of them is, as long as it's somewhere close to a quarter wavelength would be nice. But most of the ground losses are at the base speed point. This is W7RF. Go ahead.
LEI here. Basically, it's a 43-foot non-resonant, and I've got a 4-to-1 balun and an RF choke at the base of it. It works fine. I was just awed when they were talking about isolating the radials from the ground. That's all.
Yeah, only if it's elevated. Otherwise, you're doing fine. W7RF.
All right, thank you so much. W0LEI, back to Matt.
That's another good question. Dan, I got one. So if you're using a ground rod, you just put your radials, connect all those to the ground rod, and then nothing to the coax or the antenna, because all they do is basically the reflector, they reflect the signal up, correct?
Not quite. What it is it's a collection point for RF that hits the ground, if we were to put it in those terms. So if for a ground-mounted vertical, you're going to connect the coax shield and the ground radials and the ground rod to the common point. An easy way to do this that's cheap is to just take a piece of copper tubing, bend it into a loop, and then solder your radials right to it. Then you don't have to worry about nuts and bolts and corrosion. And then you could put that kind of like around the base of the antenna itself.
All right, so everything still goes to shield, no matter if you have a ground rod. Everything goes to the shield. I was kind of wondering about that. Then the way you said it kind of made me thinking, oh, wait a minute. As we have talked about, wires, horizontal wires with a wire underneath it, they're not necessarily connected, but it's acting as a reflector. So that explains that. And I think we had a beep in there, K0MLG. So anyway, to make it clear, all ground rods, all grounding, the ground radials have to go to the shield of the coax, whether you're using a ground rod or not.
That's correct. And if it's elevated, if the vertical is elevated, then the radials themselves only go to the shield of the coax and not to a ground rod itself below the radials.
Right. That would be a feat in itself to have an antenna higher in the air and then your radials sticking out however long and try to keep them off the ground and not connected. Well, I guess it'd still have to be on the ground. There's no way to keep them off. All right. Anybody else have any questions on anything?
Well, let me finish that particular part up. This is W7RF again. If anybody wants to see what that basically looks like for an elevated vertical, I have on my QRZ page for W7RF, Whiskey 7 Radio Fox, I've built a homebrew 30, 20, and 40 meter elevated radial vertical. And what I use is I just use U-posts or T-posts, 8 in a circular pattern, to hold the radials. The radials are about 6 feet off the ground with a slight slope. That's not that important, but it does help with the impedance. If you have a slight slope on the radials from the actual vertical itself, going downward a little bit, then you can actually raise the feed point impedance without losses. Otherwise, a perfect
vertical would end up being about 36 ohms if you were to have a perfectly non-lossy ground system for radials. So there is a way to keep the radials off the ground. It's just that you have to go ahead and put a lot of posts out in a circular pattern. Marty, go ahead, W7RF.
Yeah, and you got to have a lot of room. Okay, that's good information. Thanks, Dan. Anybody else with any comments on this or anything else? All right, I think we're going to go ahead and close this thing down, an hour and 20 minutes with some pretty good information. I've been watching the weather. It was 71.5 when we started, and it dropped down to 68 something a little bit ago. Now it's back up to 71.2 with winds at 15 to 20 miles an hour out here now. So nice evening. Got the windows open, and it's been kind of fun tonight. Before I close this, any other traffic for the net? All right, it's been fun, guys and gals. Appreciate it. Check in next Monday at 1800. Kyle will be running the show, and have a good week coming up. K0MLG, the repeater is now open for normal use.
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. For more information, visit our website, ncarc.net. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.